The artwork, the real thing is the process of making it, and that's living life. The thing at the end is just the thing that we call art. It ain't necessarily the art for me. The art is getting to the end of that. What was the journey to create this thing? So the artifact of it is a byproduct of living.
Welcome to A Life Worth Working, a podcast about how we get to the soul of work.
We're your hosts, Dana Allen Walsh and Michelle Weiss. Michelle is an education and workforce strategist, and I'm the senior pastor of a progressive church.
And as always, we love hearing your comments, questions, and thoughts. So please know you can email us at any time at hello@alifeworthworking.com. In this episode, we chat with Damon Davis, an award-winning postdisciplinary artist who works and lives in St. Louis, Missouri. By calling himself postdisciplinary, Damon alludes to the way he stretches across various disciplines in media, including illustration, painting, printmaking, music, film, and public art.
Damon grew up in East St. Louis, feeling from a very early age a sense of calling.
One thing I did know since as long as I knew I was an artist, and I wanted to be that as an adult. I didn't know if it was always going to be a career path, but I knew I either wanted to be an artist or a scientist. And I think everybody around me knew that for as long as I can remember. My parents, my brothers and sisters, my friends. And so I didn't have that whole, what am I going to be when I grow? I didn't really have that. And I found it very hard to relate to people in that regard. I knew it was kind of set for me. I just didn't know how to get to it. And I didn't know what that meant. You know, I grew up in East St. Louis, and there wasn't a whole lot of examples of what I am today to set a blueprint for. So I kind of been making it up as I go, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Damon went from an all-black school to an all-white school. He had never known white people before that happened, and all of a sudden he found himself in a busing program surrounded by wealthy white children and contending with microaggressions, most specifically from his teachers.
And I remember feeling like I would be behind enemy lines, to so to speak. It's the equivalent of a busing program. You live in one community and you got to go up and be around these rich kids and then come back home every day. I felt like I was in a really weird place. What was I supposed to be as a person, and being black and being where I was outnumbered? And I understood racism, but it was much more metaphorical because I was always around black people. So it wasn't really about race until I was always around. Then I understood what it was. It wasn't aggressive. It was weird, slick things being said and microaggression. Didn't have that language back then. So I didn't understand what that was. And the teachers were much more racist than the students. And it was just strange things. It was very surreal. But I know that it made me even more committed to using the talents I got to get away from the situation.
At the same time, however, Damon drew on a lot of the positive influences from that strange period in his life.
I was exposed to stuff that I never would have saw, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, and music that I never would have got to, I don't think, the natural course of things, because my brother was in the reggae, I was in the rap, my daddy was in the jazz. Rock and roll was not meal plan for me really growing up. And so that also, being in that environment expanded my palette. I was a musician, was hungry for that. I was always honing my skills. I was always looking for records, trying to learn what separated one genre from another. And I learned it was the drums, at least for me. Like I made up like almost a rubric. I was going to figure out rock and roll, so I had to figure out the timing and the spacing and what instruments are used here, how they work, and then how could I just deconstruct it? How could I take those elements and then move it into what I'm doing? And I did that through every genre almost. So I would find a genre and I would get obsessed with it for weeks and then just figure that out. The whole time I was still drawing. I don't think I ever let that go. And also my models were Master P, were Wayne and Baby and Jay-Z, people that were autonomous, whole units. They was putting together the rap and they was putting together the art, but they was also figuring out how to get it out to the world. Now, in the entrepreneurship stuff, that was the generation I was coming up in, and that's what it looked like. I wasn't exposed to all of these other things, so I was taking what I had and trying to learn from that. In a way, I feel hip-hop was the thing that gave me a course to go on, and it was a defining moment for my identity, me self-identifying with something and being able to say I'm an artist for real. And I learned all of these skills that make me a postdisciplinary artist was through hip hop.
Damon describes this learning process as his learning how to survive.
I'm in St. Louis. There is no infrastructure. There's no record labels here. So I didn't have beats, so I learned how to make beats. I learned my musical composition in that way. We didn't have graphic designers, so I learned Photoshop, building those skills. No promoters. I had to learn how to talk to people and go in. When I want to switch into something else, I don't need a gallery. But when I go in the studio and I want to sculpt something, and I want to make a musical composition, or I'm thinking about screenwriting a film, I was not satisfied with one thing and one way of expressing myself and one way of speaking to the world, or one set of knowledge or rules. And I think that constant curiosity has been the thing that has gotten me to this place as a artist, and I still got it. And that's not a straight line to it. You know what I'm saying?
It's super interesting because your ability to move and maneuver into different contexts and try out new things and be curious about new things also reflects a kind of audacity in how you approach it. You're just sort of, all right, I'm going to do this because I don't have any other options. I'm just going to do it. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily suspend their disbelief and enter into a new discipline and just sort of say, I'm going to learn how to make a film and get really good at it. There is something different to how you are able to move across disciplines. Is it fully curiosity driven, or is there some other ability for you to take risks like that?
The best I can come up with is, because I've felt like an outcast for most of my life, no matter where I was at. So I feel like my comfort zone is not having one. And I feel like if I feel too comfortable in a place, I don't feel like there's nothing left to do. Or I don't know if that is nature or nurture. But I think that there is something innately that artists and scientists, they're not different from each other. And I learned that as a kid. They literally the same thing. One is just concerned with the science of spirit, or the science of emotion, heart, soul, that sort of thing. And the other one is concerned more with the natural world and quantifying this dimension. But the same attributes, that curiosity and also a willingness to fail. And I think that I failed so much that the more you do something, the less afraid you are of it. I've been embarrassed so much that it don't hurt no more, right? And I think other people that's been cool their whole life can't take embarrassment. Right? They can't be vulnerable, and it's not a virtue for me. I don't think that it's a good thing to be so afraid to move out of things, because I think it stunts growth, right?
Damon is willing to step out of his comfort zone in order to grow.
What I'm constantly trying to do is grow into the next thing. Once you start growing, you die. I'm not afraid of death in the way but I mean, like, the death of wonder. That scares me more than dying. Everybody starts off as an artist, but they have to water it and keep it alive.
I love that Damon explains how wonder is the core thing that needs to be cultivated and kept alive. Otherwise, we wither and die.
Curiosity and vulnerability are the biggest thing. I got a normal level of insecurity, but I have trained a muscle to run through certain levels of fear, and I'm always trying to make the muscle stronger. And that's what the art is. I feel like that you're a real artist. The art is just a byproduct of me living life. The artwork, the real thing is the process of making it, and that's living life. The thing at the end is just the thing that we call the art ain't necessarily the art for me. The art is getting to the end of that. What was the journey to create this thing? So the artifact of it is a byproduct of living.
And through chasing that wonder, art is merely a byproduct of that kind of approach to life.
Damon's latest project is called Ligeia Mare, a science fiction opera based in African-American musical forms, which will be presented as a radio play podcast later this year. We asked him, why an opera?
Well, music is my first love. I told you that. Well, that's the first thing I thought I could be a professional at, say that. And it's a space that I know how to make records. I've been a producer for a very long time, and I knew that I could explore a storytelling mechanism through that. It was two things. I wanted to tell a story through music, and that's what an opera is. It's not tied to any musical genre, but we just subscribe classical music to it, because that's when the idea of opera comes from. But it's not so much tied to a musical genre, and I learned that. And when I decided to do this, there was nobody that looked like me that I had ever seen do it. And so that might have been a superficial reason, but it was a reason nonetheless. And so I leaned into both of those, and I knew that what I was already doing was opera. And so I was like, why are we not calling it that? Why is every Kendrick Lamar album not called an opera? Because it's a complete thought, and it's a story, step by step, taking you all the way through. That's what I wanted to do, but I wanted to make it bigger. I wanted to use some classical music. I want to do that. That is the motivation. But when you get into what is it really saying, and as a piece of work, if you remove the bells and whistles of its music and story, is about a kid that didn't feel he was in the right place and he didn't feel wanted. And he had a very specific relationship with his parents. I grew up, I had brothers and sisters, but I came so late that it wasn't like I had siblings my age. And the closest thing I got to siblings is my nieces and nephews. It's as though I got two sets of parents. And my parents was grandparent age. So I'm growing up in this house as me and my mom and my dad. And I didn't have a good relationship with my father. He wasn't the kindest person. And since he died, I have let go a lot of things, found forgiveness in certain places. And then I also learned how to survive from it. So some good things came from it. But when I wrote this opera, I wanted to amend, I guess, my childhood the way I wish it would have happened, you know, than what I got, right? And I think it's a power in art. There's a made up component, and I really like using my imagination to think of a world that I want to be in, instead of always harping on the what we got here and negativity of it all. That particular project is about imagination leading to freedom. Can you imagine a different world? Can you imagine a different system of living for human beings? Can you imagine a different way we treat the environment and each other, right? But mine is just a parable about a kid and his father and his mother. So that's the way I'm using that basic tenet, because I think a lot of the problems we got is due to a lack of fucking imagination.
Amen. Is that the gift of being the artist that you're constantly leaning into imagination, and that's the tool in your toolbox, that you look at the world, you see it as it is, you see yourself as it is, and you say, what else is here? What more can I see? What more can I imagine?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that you say it's a gift. It ain't always a gift. You know what I mean? I've learned that you got to be simultaneously super self-aware and delusional, which is a hard thing to tessellate between.
Yes,
you know, and knowing when to turn which one on. But I think that is what that is what an artist is. Now, at least that's the artist I want to be. Having imagination, but also knowing when to put your feet on the ground and having the humility to be self-aware about what's going on and being honest about it to yourself.
I love that. I love that idea of toggling between the two.
Damon epitomizes a person with a strong sense of calling. He thinks of calling this way.
My calling was to make things. It's to make things and tell stories and speak to people that are like me, to come from the places that I come from. I'm working in story, and that's what all of us are doing. But we're doing it so that we can better understand the world that we're in. And I think that is my calling. That is where I find the most joy, the most fulfillment, and the purpose.
We couldn't help but feel a sense of awe in how his wonder leads him into new discoveries and new approaches to any form of art. I love that he called it a fair amount of self-awareness and self-delusion. That's a really wonderful way of capturing what he's able to do, because he has to have the courage to jump into these totally different realms. Most of us love working within our boxes, our little containers. We love excelling within our spheres. It's so interesting to see this pattern of people who are really leaning into what might be possible. And it's not necessarily like a thick skin. It's more this centering of spirit, of how to receive rejection and how to continue on.
What is certainly striking about Damon's story is the fearlessness with which he pursues these various media. He embraces discomfort in order to empathize differently and communicate with a wide range of audiences.
Why aren't there more postdisciplinary artists like Damon Davis out there in the world? Why are we so okay siloing our work and ourselves? How do we keep that sense of wonder, curiosity, and vulnerability alive? She's Dana Walsh.
And she's Michelle Weiss.
This has been another episode of A Life Worth Working.
Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and loved ones who may also be searching for purpose and meaning in their work lives, or what we call the soul of work.